Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, May 28th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about the Pennsylvania GOP primary. And we've been talking about this for the past 2 weeks, primarily because we still do not have a victor in the state of Pennsylvania. If you look at the NBC News decision desk and any other reputable website, you will find that they have not made a projection as to who will win in the state of Pennsylvania at this point in time. That's because the margin of victory for the leader, Mehmet Oz, is down to less than 1,000 votes out of 1.34 million votes cast in the entire Republican primary. As a result, the margin of victory for Mehmet Oz is less than 0.01%, meaning that it is amongst the narrowest of margins that Pennsylvania has ever seen in its modern election season, meaning that we still are headed into a recount, which gives us time to understand who's going to win, but as of right now, we do not have an official winner. However, one candidate in specific, Mehmet Oz, better known as Dr. Oz across the nation, has declared victory in this Republican primary. This comes as a result of President Trump advocating that he does declare victory, calling on him to make it harder for them to find ballots through this victory declaration. Dr. Oz released a video yesterday calling himself the presumptive GOP Senate nominee. And while it may be true that he is the presumptive nominee in some people's eyes, this race certainly is not finished yet. While he does lead in the overall average and the overall numbers, I do think that he is going to win this race. I think it is wrong to declare yourself as the presumptive GOP Senate nominee and pivot towards the general election, considering that this is still continuing. And there are considerations about potentially more ballots entering into this race. What do I mean by that? Well, Dave McCormick is the second place candidate in this Pennsylvania GOP primary. And he has called on the unmarked ballots for the undated ballots that were submitted via absentee to be counted in this GOP Senate primary. Because if they are counted, that could potentially be hundreds of more votes that McCormick could end up winning that would result in a recount being triggered yet again that would narrow it up enough that potentially a change in the final tally based off of the recount procedure could result in a Dave McCormick victory. What we are finding is that Dave McCormick is not done with this, and neither is the Pennsylvania Republican Party. There has not been an official declaration from the Associated Press, from any major media source, for a reason, because this recount does give us an opportunity to see this election overturned. Not because there was any type of fraud or any type of impact from outside players in this race, but more so because we are looking at such a narrow margin that any type of human error might be able to completely change the race if it is caught in this recount procedure. But Dr. Oz is tired of waiting. And to be fair, this election did occur over a week ago. It occurred 2 Tuesdays ago, which meant that we are still now talking about a primary that should have been settled that evening. But because it is so close, people are unwilling to really jump the gun, unlike Dr. Oz, who has seemed to have taken the advice of President Trump and declared victory already. Dave McCormick, on the other hand, certainly isn't over it yet. He is going to court over this. He is trying to sue the state of Pennsylvania and the election board to essentially force them to count every ballot, regardless if it was dated or not. While the Pennsylvania GOP certainly does not agree with this position, and neither does the national GOP, he doesn't care, because McCormick knows that this court case could be the one thing stopping him, or these uncounted ballots could be the one thing stopping him from winning the GOP nomination in the state of Pennsylvania and eventually entering into the United States Senate. And there is a case to be made about McCormick becoming that GOP nominee in terms of being more electable, but honestly, I just don't think the votes are there. By the end of this recount, I do think Dr. Oz will be the nominee, but I don't agree with jumping the gun this early. I think in political practice, Republicans might be saying, yes, Dr. Oz should jump the gun. He should declare himself as the nominee, but to not even allow the recount to even begin, it begins on June 1st, means that Dr. Oz doesn't really believe that there is any possibility that he's going to lose. And while that may just be viewed as candidate belief and things of that nature, the GOP also has not declared him as the official nominee, which means you can't move towards the general election just yet. I would also like to say that in terms of just viewing at it from a trusting of democracy and handling of state election standpoint, I wouldn't want a presumptive or potential nominee to declare victory when the votes haven't been fully counted in that sense. When you have a recount that is triggered by automatic law, you typically see these candidates wait until they actually need to declare victory. While it wasn't for Donald Trump, he did not want to wait. Even when he was down in the state of Pennsylvania, he still decided to declare victory. I do think that this is just the wrong time for him to do it. It makes him look as if this is not the way that he thinks that it's going to go, that he wants to completely disregard the means of counting an election through and through, means disregarding a recount that is set to already occur in the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, it has already been announced by the Secretary of State. Everyone is gearing up for it. Lawyers are getting ready. Dr. Oz hiring a lawyer team, yet here he is declaring victory. It just seems very out of place. And while he may be right at the end of the day that he will be the GOP nominee, to do it this early with still a significant amount of uncertainty, I would say. You know, there is a very real possibility that McCormick does end up pulling something and the courts end up ruling in his favor that these undated ballots be counted, as they did rule in the favor of 5 plaintiffs back in 2021, ruling that the undated ballots must be counted. There is a possibility that there is a ruling in favor of McCormick, which could completely upend this Dr. Oz victory, which would make the GOP look even more fractured. But to declare victory already, again, just simply is just the wrong thing to do. Looking at where we are, there is still slight uncertainty about whether or not David McCormick or Mehmet Oz are going to become the Republican nominee. While the predicted betting market seemed to have solidified on Dr. Oz, at the end of the day, this declaration moves us into the general election season, whether we like it or not. We are now heading into a direct matchup between Oz and Fetterman until otherwise proven wrong. But this also might push away about a third of the party that decided to vote for Dave McCormick in this primary, those who are still holding on to hope that McCormick might still be the nominee. And when they see Oz out there declaring victory at the direction of former President Donald Trump, they may not take too kindly to that. I also think that Dr. Oz just simply is the weaker candidate. I want to point something out that I made a point of briefly in a previous video, but there was a spike in possibility that Oz became the GOP nominee on April 9th. He jumped to 49 cents, and I believe this might have been around the time that President Trump either visited Pennsylvania or threw his endorsement behind Mehmet Oz. And previously, what you found was that McCormick had a pretty strong lead. He was expected overwhelmingly at one point to win the GOP Senate nomination, but then after that sort of bump, Dr. Oz really skyrocketed in the predicted numbers. It became neck and neck, and then it came to a point where Oz became the very clear favorite. And by the end of it, and as of right now, he obviously is the favorite. But during that April 9th rise, what you find on Predicted is that there was an April 9th rise not for the GOP in the Senate election in Pennsylvania, but rather the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party went from 40 cents for a yes share for victory in Pennsylvania all the way up to 49 cents. And that was a result, clearly, of Dr. Oz really jumping up in terms of his possibility of winning that Senate GOP primary. McCormick has always been the stronger GOP candidate. He has always been the one that if I was picking for the Republicans, I would have wanted him to be the nominee. Because Oz very clearly is in this because it's politically advantageous, because there's an opportunity in Pennsylvania, not because he had any real intention of running for office in the past. Dr. Oz is a TV personality propped up by other celebrities who entered into this race at the direction of President Trump. Donald Trump wanted Oz to run, and Dr. Oz, I'm sure, wanted to be a senator. And when given the opportunity, he moved from New Jersey to Pennsylvania and decided to run. Dave McCormick also is not an original Pennsylvania resident. He is someone who moved to the state, but he also comes across as a bit more of a moderate, someone who could actually be a standard GOP nominee in Pennsylvania that we've seen in the past. The same type of nominee that could win the state of Pennsylvania in this type of election, because President Trump was just rejected back in the 2020 election. I think that Pennsylvania Republicans have elected moderates in the past. For instance, Pat Toomey, who this seat is exactly meant to replace. Pat Toomey voted to convict President Trump, but did well in 2016, outperforming the president, won in 2010 against Joe Sestak, a very winnable race for the Democratic Party, replacing Arlen Specter, the Republican who turned towards the Democratic Party. I mean, what we have found, historically speaking, is that while Donald Trump did win in 2016 on this very different type of campaign, unlike we've ever seen for a Republican in at least the past century, what you are finding is that that exact ideology, that exact weaponization of non-political correctness and the way that President Trump really goes about his campaign policies and campaign reforms, you are looking at Pennsylvania reject him just 4 years later. I think we are now in a position where the state of Pennsylvania wants somebody different, and Dr. Oz really doesn't offer that. I think he will again be that nominee, but now pushing forward to the general election doesn't help him. And it also doesn't help the GOP when you have a GOP candidate declaring themselves a victor, and then you have the Republicans still recounting the votes. You have them speaking on court cases. You have court cases being decided for Dave McCormick. You have court cases being decided for Mehmet Oz. You have lawyers gearing up on both sides. I mean, what you are finding is that around the state of Pennsylvania, you are going to see the GOP doing practically, double time, working for this general election while also trying to figure out what the hell happened in their primary and what's going to be the final result of it. Are they going to publicly take a stance against David McCormick in terms of court proceedings? Are they going to send lawyers to aid Dr. Oz, or at least those against moving the undated ballots to be counted? What are they going to do? These are things that the GOP is going to have to consider. They are going to have to make decisions, and they are going to have to ultimately back one candidate over the other. And while they have very much said, we do not want these ballots uncounted, they have not directly said Oz should be declared the winner. They have not directly said that Dave McCormick should drop his case altogether. All they have said is that they do side against choosing to count the undated ballots, but they also have said that both of these candidates would be wonderful GOP nominees. The chairwoman of the RNC also agreed to that statement, meaning that they are still considering the possibility of both of them becoming a GOP nominee. So we have yet to see what happens in this recount. 1.334 million votes counted across the state of Pennsylvania in this GOP primary, which means that there are a lot of votes that need to be recounted, which could push us out even further. I think Mehmet Oz is declaring himself the victor because he thinks if this still shows that he wins, it will be a week and a half of wasted time on top of a week and a half of already wasted time. The Democratic Party has been really doubling down on their efforts, especially as Doug Mastriano won that GOP nomination. I think Oz is realizing that he needs to start getting focused on the general election. I just also think that it makes the GOP look a bit fractured. It makes them look a little bit unorganized and unable to come together behind a nominee to figure out what actually happened in their primary. Altogether, you're seeing calls from President Trump for one candidate to make a victory speech. On the other hand, you have other Republicans saying, let's hold off, let's wait for the recount results. You have some Republicans in this race also, not moving forward with an official endorsement for either of these two, making decisions about whether or not the courts should actually rule in favor of one candidate or the other. At this point in time, I am not super confident the GOP is in a strong enough position to win this Senate race. I think they were at one point. I think they definitely were the favorites at one point. I think David McCormick offers a lot more electability. I think he offers a much better platform in terms of, what people will view him as. I think McCormick is more of a stereotypical, more traditional Republican. And while that might not have been what worked in 2016, it is what is going to work in 2022. And Dr. Oz simply doesn't provide that. Looking at where Dr. is right now and how he got there, he is completely ridden on the back of President Donald Trump. The reason why he won this nomination, if he is to win it, will be because of President Donald Trump. And when you take a look at what he has actually done in Pennsylvania, the policies that he's ran on in the past, you won't find anything because he will be viewed this way, and he very much is this way. Someone who decided to run in this race because there was an open race in Pennsylvania, it was an opportunity, and he knew he would get the endorsement from President Trump. When Sean Parnell pulled out of the state of Pennsylvania, the GOP race was flooded by candidates. Kathy Barnett, Dr. Oz, Dave McCormick. You saw all of these people enter into the race because they knew there would be an opportunity. But only one of them will end up being the victor. And unfortunately for the GOP, we simply don't know who that is going to be. But one of these candidates is very confident that it is going to be him. So by the end of this, what do I want you to take away from this? Well, I think the GOP doesn't benefit from one candidate declaring victory when there hasn't been an official declared victor. Even if it may be right, it isn't good to call a race this early for yourself and move towards the general election when the GOP and the statewide election board is trying to figure out what happened and recount all of these ballots, trying to see, is there something wrong with what the results had shown? Is there going to be a major change? This isn't the 2016 election when Jill Stein wanted to fundraise tens of millions of dollars to get these recounts in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, because those margins were super substantial. Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton in the state of Pennsylvania by tens of thousands of votes, and that was 0.77%. That wasn't going to change by a recount. But this margin, 940 votes out of 1.334 million, means that 940 votes is about 0.008% of the overall percentage of votes, meaning that it is so small that the margin here for the GOP candidate, Mehmet Oz, is so narrow that it could be overturned by a primary. We have seen changes in results in other states. We have seen changes in results in other counties based off of recounts. In the 2021 recount in the state of Pennsylvania, we saw the votes shift narrowly. Is it enough to change the primary? I don't know. We don't know what the results of this recount are going to be. It hasn't even occurred yet. It will begin June 1st. We will start to get the results reported after June 7th, hopefully, or potentially before, because we want to know what actually happened. But the fact that it is so narrow means that it isn't good to declare victory already. Forcing yourself into the general election when the GOP clearly isn't prepared makes them work overtime, makes you work overtime. You're going to be fighting, in a lawsuit. You're also going to be fighting on the battleground here for the Senate race in Pennsylvania. So a lot going on. Declaring victory already means that McCormick's case is still going to be considered, but you are completely dismissing it. And I don't know if the GOP will take that kindly. I don't know if McCormick supporters will take that kindly. We do have to wait a little bit further, which I think Mehmet Oz is realizing does damage him, giving the Democratic Party extra time to campaign in the state of Pennsylvania. At the end of the day, this is the fault of the GOP. This also is just the fault of a completely close race, which they technically couldn't control, but it is very interesting to see and does sort of tell us that there isn't a clear consensus behind one GOP nominee, which again makes it difficult for Dr. Oz to jump the gun and declare himself immediately the presumptive GOP nominee when the majority of Republicans did not vote for him in the first place. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.